horror games. For what feels like forever, they've existed all over the internet, usually gaining some form of popularity. It mainly started with games like The 8 Pages a couple decades ago. Damn, now I feel old. Anyway, while Spider-Man did gain traction as a horror game, it wasn't until 2014 that things really took off. If only it were the same as it was back then. Hi, I'm Scorch. In this video, I'll dive into the FNaF games and how they've evolved, or rather, devolved over time. And if you enjoy, subscribe. If you don't, that's fine. I won't judge. Subscribe anyway. With that out of the way, here's why FNaF doesn't feel the same anymore. The year is 2014. Indie game developer Scott Cawthon is considering retirement after several failures in the video game industry. To go out with a bang of sorts, Scott takes the feedback of his previous game, Chipper & Sons Lumber Co., with it feeling too creepy and animatronic-like, and uses it to make a horror game, Five Nights at Freddy's. Scott releases the game on August 8th, and the rest is history. People like Markiplier are often credited with popularizing the game, and rightfully so. The game went viral all over the world and inspired Scott to turn it into a series. Now it's 2023. FNaF 1 is still iconic, so let's dive into the game itself. Way back in the day, there wasn't much lore aside from the obvious dead kids possessing robots. Scott clearly just put this together on his own in just a short time. Looking back on the character design, I gotta say, even though it's still iconic today, they aren't that scary anymore. That makes sense, as they were meant to be scary plus cute, but now that they've been memed beyond belief, it's lost their original charm. The gameplay is pretty simplistic, all things considered, as it's just a point-and-click survival game. The only objective is to last a few real-time minutes and boom, you finished one night. Of course, without this game we wouldn't have the franchise as a whole. Speaking of which, after the success of FNaF 1, Scott somehow managed to make a full sequel that expanded upon the original in the exact same year. FNaF 2 also came out with viral success, and it's not hard to see why. It built upon what made the original game great and expanded it to another level. FNaF 2, to this day, might be the best game in the series. The gameplay is drastically different from its predecessor. You have no doors, as they are instead replaced by vents that certain characters can crawl through, and a hallway in front of you. I'm not sure what the in-universe reason for this is, but let's ignore that. You have a flashlight with a limited battery, you have a mask that only fools certain characters, a music box to wind, and obviously the security cameras. I also love the character designs in this game because they are peak. The withered animatronics are the best version of their characters, and the toy animatronics perfectly capture the whole mascot horror trope that these games created. The lore is also expanded upon. We not only get the post-night mini-games, which are now a staple in the franchise, but we also get more story elements, such as the existence of Purple Guy and the 5 dead kids, while also learning that there were 5 more kids killed sometime down the road. This is when the theories started spawning, with many people around the world trying to piece together the story, especially now that we knew the game took place in 1987, the same year of the infamous Bite of 87. But the story wouldn't get going, in my opinion, until March of 2015. On the aforementioned date, after several teasers, Scott released FNaF 3, and the reception was lukewarm, if you know what I mean. People called this game awful, which for the time is understandable. In many fans' eyes, the game shied away from the horror too much. This was primarily due to only one animatronic being a legitimate threat, and the said animatronic having a lame-ass jump scare. Nowadays, I think this game is a diamond in the rough. The gameplay isn't anything special, but I think the concept of one animatronic being the only villain is creative, and Scott using the Phantoms was also interesting. On the other hand, the Phantoms are mid. I don't think their concept is bad, at all. But their designs leave a lot to be desired since they're just green versions of the previous designs. But Springtrap is the best animatronic in the series. Not just in terms of lore, we'll get to that later, but his design is peak. I mean, the fact that you can still see his corpse and they're writhing in agony is just horrifying to think about. And I know people hated him for his jump scare, myself included, but over time, I think it says a lot about Springtrap. I mean, he's a walking corpse. Literally. And you know what he's capable of even before you learn of his true identity. He doesn't need to scream, to lash out like the children, no. No, you're just an obstacle in his way. Reminder, this is long before Michael Afton was ever a thing in the fans' eyes. This is directed at the player, not the character. And because he doesn't appear out of the blue, you feel an overwhelming sense of dread, of hopelessness, knowing there's no way out of this as you succumb to your fate. Anyway, when people learned this was Purple Guy, it was huge. And at this point, after people figure out how to get the good ending, and after night 6, things seemed fine. Oh look, it burned down. He's finally... oh. Okay, that's terrifying. Also, little thing I wanted to talk about, The game is or was ridiculed for its lack of jump scares, but that's the thing. It doesn't need jump scares because it nails something else. Atmosphere. The reason I hold the Bendy games in such high regard is that they nail this aspect, setting the tone and everything. In FNaF III, which takes place 30 years after FNaF I, you can see the decaying walls and office. Granted, it's a horror attraction, but it's meant to be from the old pizzerias. Springtrap's decaying form also says a lot about the game's tone. All that you knew has faded, grown old. And the ambience also nails this. Whereas the FNaF II ambience is well known, although it has lost its scariness, the FNaF III ambience is often overlooked. I like how creepy and unsettling it sounds, giving you the vibes that this isn't what you remember. At least not entirely. And in all honesty, I think FNaF III would be a lot more popular if it wasn't released, like, a few short months after FNaF II. Because in all honesty, technically, you could argue this would have been, like, the ending of the series. But that didn't happen. Wow, looking at the script, this is a massive section. But anyways, I think you know what comes next. In response to the claims that FNaF III wasn't scary enough, Scott went all out later that year for what was supposed to be the final chapter in FNaF's story, FNaF IV. And oh boy, did it deliver. Well, for its time, I guess. As usual, this game got popular online, being the scariest game ever or something like that. I don't know, I didn't use the internet in 2015. Honestly, looking back, I think this game might be overrated. The gameplay is the biggest issue for me. Is it scary? Yes. I haven't even beaten the first night because I was too terrified. Anyway, the main gimmick in this game is listening. You see, to know when the animatronics are there, you need to listen for their breathing, and it sucks. It does. The original release forced you to turn your headphones to the max, so if you got jump scared, bye-bye eardrums. Scott fixed this, but I still thought it should be mentioned. Also, I think the gameplay gets too repetitive at times. Since it was released as a supposed finale to FNaF, it decides to go back to what made the original game great to begin with, by having the exact same gameplay. At least almost. They added a plush trap minigame in between nights, and plush trap is meant to be Springtrap, but a plush. It's fascinating how popular plush trap became. As for the designs, to me, it makes it feel like this game might as well be Shadow the Hedgehog because of how edgy they can come off as. Like, I get they're meant to look scary, but they almost look fan-made by a 14-year-old. I get they're meant to be a child's nightmares, and they serve their purpose, but still. I do like Fredbear and Nightmare Rion's designs because they tried something different. Plush trap design also goes hard. The ambience in this game mimics both the 6 AM bell from the previous entries along with the creepy version of the FNaF II ambience. God, to this day it gives me shivers down my spine. And then there's the lore. In terms of lore, this game is the worst. Why? Because instead of solving everything, it all becomes more complicated, giving us more questions than answers. Who is the crying child? Who the hell is Fredbear? Why is this kid important?
Was that the bite of 87?
Speaking of which, this bite complicated things even more because of the TV showing that it was the year 1983 and the fact this was never mentioned before, so just added to the pile of what the hell is the timeline? Oh, the stupid box. Also, fun fact, it's the only FNaF game without any spoken dialogue. Overall, the original 4 games were something special. They had this vibe to them despite their somewhat simplistic gameplay, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But of course, it wouldn't end there. In 2016, Scott made a new game. And unlike all that came before it, this game took the franchise where it had never gone before. The most notable change was the addition of voice actors because up until that point, any spoken dialogue was from Scott himself. The gameplay is also a new concept. The security camera part is locked to a specific part of the game and is instead replaced with a form of free roaming. I haven't played much of Sister Location because of how scary it is, and also I don't usually get time to anyway. From what I have played, this game requires patience and concentration while also keeping you on your toes. I think the character design is also interesting in its own right, especially in their jump scares. My little brain could not comprehend their faces opening as a kid. And finally, the lore. The lore in this game gave us more of a refined timeline, which, although still incomplete, was starting to finally come together. Not only did we have our protagonist, Michael, after so long, We also had a plethora of new and interesting characters like Elizabeth and the Funtime animatronics, and of course, Spaghetti! Also, you can't tell me it wasn't cool to see Sprint Shop again after so long. The overall tone is reminiscent of FNaF 1's claustrophobic area, as while you can move somewhat, you still feel trapped. Okay, it's probably not that deep, but you get the idea. The year 2017. Scott has apparently decided to take the franchise in a new direction in the form of a pizza tycoon, and has allegedly cancelled FNaF 6. Fans, while perplexed, are also excited. They download the game, they start it up, and surprise, surprise, the man trolled us. It turns out that this is, in fact, FNaF 6. I'm not really sure what everyone thought at the moment, but I'm sure you can take a guess. FNaF 6 was meant to, at long last, be the end of FNaF's storyline, once and for all. So is it good? Well, my big issue is the gameplay. In the morning, you mess around with your pizzeria and play some minigames, while in the night you have to deal with certain animatronics that you find outside your office. Odd. You have to decide whether or not to salvage the animatronic for money. Your job doesn't end there because you have to finish up tasks while surviving the animatronics you kept inside. And to be honest, the gameplay is pretty mid. It suffers from the same issue that plagued FNaF IV's gameplay: repetitiveness. Every night feels the same, and every morning is just boring tycoon gameplay. Also, while most of the character designs are fairly decent, we can all agree Scraptrap is god-awful. It would only get worse though. However, it all pays off for them, which makes up for every bad thing about this game. At the end of the game, there are multiple endings that get you certificates. I won't dive into all of them except for a specific one, the true ending. If you have lasted all throughout the game and earned enough money and gotten all the animatronics, you get the best speech in video game history. Or one of them anyway. Henry Emily's final words. Such a badass ending to an unforgettable franchise. Everything felt tied together, all the loose threads and stuff, and after UCN releasing in 2018, that should have been it. At least for William Afton. Right? Unfortunately, he always comes back. Before I move on to the Steel Wool era of games, I want to talk about the major reason I made this video. The fandom. Since FNaF gained popularity, it's only natural that a fan base began to surround the games. SFMs, theories, fan art, there was so much. And I suppose there still is, but man. Something about the old days. Well, yeah, old SFMs are trash. Back then, they were hilarious, entertaining, and just a great time overall. Oh, and don't even get me started on the FNaF songs. Those were historic. Oh, and the YouTubers. The YouTubers were amazing. And they still are. They've been making content for years, and without them, I don't think FNaF would have been as popular as it is now. I don't know what else to say about the community, honestly. I think that's the biggest thing for me. The fandom has changed, that's for sure. Not in a terrible way, but not in a good way either. Gone are the days of epic SFM song animations, although there are still some. There aren't as many as there were back in, say, 2019. Of people making FNaF theories that made sense and tied everything together, probably due to the overabundance of books. Now it's all a mess. The older fans have come and gone, leaving their mark. Now there's just a bunch of kids whose only prior horror game experience is freaking Garden of Banban or Prop B playtime. It's not as bad as like other fandoms are today, but it's not the same. In 2019, Steel Wool Studios collaborated with Scott Cawthon to make another FNaF game, but this one in VR. Why? Because unlike most game developers, Scott cares about his games and is passionate about making them. I'd say it paid off. FNaF VR is highly regarded as one of the best, if not the best, FNaF games to date. It mainly focused on changing up the original gameplay of FNaF 1, 2, and 3, plus some other new game modes. I never played this game, so I can't talk about it too much. I'm not too big a fan of the Steel Wool models, but I like the design of Strapping Dreadbear, and that's it. That is all I can say. Oh, and the lore was interesting for its time. As of today, though, it kind of all feels like a waste of time. Oh, but we're not done yet. I wish we were, though. I could go for a Freddy Fazbear pizza. But let's finish the video first, huh? Anyways, remember FNaF AR? God, I could make an entire video on how this game crashed and burned. I'll just summarize the issues. Repetitive gameplay, microtransactions, more microtransactions, ugly skins, even uglier skins, lack of lore, lack of new characters or updates. I could go on, but that would make this video longer than it has to be, and I'm not going to make future me go through the pain of editing even more footage. You're welcome. Also, Lumix kind of dished the game, so yeah. Man, this game is a big missed opportunity. Not as big as the next one, though. FNaF security breach. Where do I begin? Well, how about before the game was even released? Scott announced the game with a teaser back in 2019 with a 2020 release date. If you remember, that didn't happen, likely due to the you-know-what virus. Because of this, the game kept getting delayed over and over and over again. Started to get annoying, especially since we were shown a lot of the game already. Then we finally got it, a December 2021 release date. Finally, after so long, we would get what we were promised. So we thought. Despite being the most hyped or overhyped FNaF game, Security Breach is currently the lowest rated FNaF game on Steam or anywhere, which is astounding. You would think that this game, which promised so much and took so long to release, would be worth the wait. And oh boy, was it not at all. To put it lightly, it was a disaster. I've never seen FNaF fans hate a game this much before, not even FNaF III. I mean, not even Markiplier seemed to enjoy it. First off, the gameplay was riddled with bugs and glitches. They weren't even funny bugs either, like in Jedi Fallen Order. More so, they made the game borderline unplayable for some people. It also gave this game a feeling that it was rushed or unfinished. The game was a mess, to put it lightly. And I'm not just talking about the gameplay, the story is written to the point where it feels like a lot, and I mean a lot, was left on the cutting room floor. And there was. A video I saw recently revealed how much of the security guard Vanessa's storyline was cut and changed from its original intention. Like, even her whole personality was changed. Also, if you no-clip into the room Afton is in and try to get close, you'll get the jump scare sound, but no actual jump scare animation, meaning some code got unused. Speaking of Afton, why was he even here? Now, there are several factors that can be attributed to this disaster. One might be the ambitions of the developers. I've learned the hard way not to get too ambitious, and I think this might apply to the game. They gave themselves a deadline multiple times, and when they couldn't pull that off, they have to delay the game. Eventually, they released the game just by cutting so much. This takes me to reason 2. The fans. Remember how I said that the fandom has changed drastically over the years? Well, now it's mainly filled with a bunch of childish idiots who have never been taught the meaning of patience. These fans pressure their devs into rushing the game, at least from what I can tell, as they always do, and they are the ones to complain about the quote-unquote rushed game. That being said, it's also partially Steelwool's fault for choosing to listen to these fans and release the game in this state. What's even worse is that after only a few patches and bug fixes, the developers themselves have stated, "We are satisfied with the current state of the game," and have moved on to the Ruin DLC, which kinda sucks. Although I do think Ruin could redeem the game. That being said, what is the problem with this game? Well, first off, the story. This game's story genuinely made me sit down and think, why do I still like this franchise? And I think I might have killed my interest in the lore. I used to watch MadPat's videos all the time, and now I just don't feel like it. It's so boring. There's nothing remotely interesting about them in the game, or any character in the game. And you have to look for little details and stuff to understand who they are. It's ridiculous. And also, stop bringing back Afton. It's become stupid at this point. I don't have the energy to watch any video involving the security breach lore. I don't even know who the hell the Mimic is, because it's just that boring to me. Also, the gameplay is certainly something. I know people always wanted a free-roam FNaF game, but it doesn't feel right to me. I didn't bother getting the game, but I don't even want to. Do I even need to get into the bugs? I think not. Do I hate this game? Maybe, maybe not. It hasn't made me change my view on FNaF as a whole, though. Hey guys, what's up? So, while I was editing this video, and by editing I mean procrastinating editing this video, Ruin came out, and it's actually pretty good. From what I've seen, it isn't as buggy, and the story actually makes sense, and the voice acting is good. Not that the voice acting in the original was bad, but like, they cut out a lot of voice lines, so yeah, it's good to see that this one's actually, you know, not as unfinished as Security Breach ended up being. But, of course, I do have my flaws and complaints. I won't spoil anything, like, at all, because At the time of recording this, Ruin is still fairly new. I'll probably make an entire video on Ruin sometime in September when enough time has passed, assuming people are still interested by then, because I have my own theories and stuff. I do wish Ruin was longer, and the endings actually made sense. Again, I'm not spoiling anything, I'm just saying that's the only thing I wanted to say. So yes, Ruin is good. I wouldn't say it's fixed all my current problems with FNaF, because it definitely hasn't. But it's a start, and I hope this means Steel Wool has learned their lesson. Bye. FNaF isn't slowing down anytime soon. I mean, we've got the FNaF movie coming out in October, the Ruin DLC, the thousands of books that nobody reads, and a somewhat strong community. God, there were way too many books out there. But you might be wondering what I mean by changed my view in the last section. Well, to put it bluntly, I think FNaF has gone on too long. At least, in the sense that there's no new, fresh lore. Even the movie is just a loose adaptation of already existing media. To conclude, I don't hate FNaF, but I don't love it as much as I used to. That doesn't change the impact it's had on me, but I do think something needs to shake up the status quo, like not bringing back Afton. Don't let my opinions change yours, though. I hope you enjoyed me ranting about Five Nights at Freddy's. Subscribe, and I hope you have a good day. Peace.
I put your new phone.